Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duvall, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who is not so much a member of the Stars community as of the Stars Hollow community.
Tim Longo.
Hey, buddy.
Nice.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much.
Good, very good.
I was going to work in Space Mountain there somehow and tease you even more, but...
No, Stars Hollow. I was in the actual Stars Hollow real-life inspirational town of Washington Depot, and it was quite fun.
Yeah, for those who are not in the know, that's a Gilmore Girls reference. I haven't watched the show myself, but Tim's daughter is a huge fan, so that's a little bit of a little play on the stars. A little play on the stars.
Nice.
But you know, tonight you get to be a member of Stars.
Ooh,
so
nice.
You get to be a star.
Yeah.
Which is good. I guess we should first throw back to our last episode, which it's a little over a week later, and I'm still just like a buzz.
Yeah.
with that conversation with Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky, episode 33. Fantastic. Like, that's the only one I've actually listened to again, like after I've done the post-production on it. just to listen to it one more time. So I lived it, and then I stitched it all together, and then I listened to it again. So yeah, good times.
Yeah, I probably should too. I think I would enjoy it as well. And I really, I really want to get back to Wasteland 2. Yeah. It's having a time, but just kind of reignited that excitement all over again, talking to them, and really excited about whatever they're doing. And yeah, it was it was a true. We talked about it, I think, after in the kind of post show, but it's just a treat to listen to them talk about. Like, it's a no joke, unique situation, unique story when it comes to game development. That game. Yeah, and really having both of them on, because Tim did. We referenced his GDC talk, which is that I don't know if we mentioned it. Is that widely available, or is that only
for? It's freely available. I linked to it in the first or second notes for the Fallout series. Yeah.
So there's that, which gives you a lot of good insight and stories. But having both of them on and kind of the back and forth,
right.
And having Leonard on, who probably hasn't talked that much about it, was just really neat. And they're just such good friends, you can tell.
Yeah, it really was. And, it's it was good to take a good long look at what it might be like after a Trump presidency. So, there's that too.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Bringing it back to politics. Hey, folks, vote. Yeah. It's only a week away. The next podcast you hear from us, we will either be in the depths of despond or, moderately happy. So...
Yep. Yep.
I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but vote.
My ballot's already in the mail.
Good. No, I vote on the day, but yeah. Okay. Let's turn to this next few weeks classic, which is Resident Evil. Originally a PlayStation 1 title developed by Capcom. It coined the title survival horror, at least directly referencing it in its actual game. It says "Welcome to the survival horror."
Yeah, I made a note of that.
Yep. I think other games, such as Alone in the Dark, have the survival horror feel much earlier than this game does, but this definitely kind of cements what it means to be a horror game. And I want to get right into sort of my first topic. It's like a total counterpoint to what a lot of else is going on in video games at the time. It's the opposite of player empowerment. It is entirely about removing things that empower the player. That even then might have been somewhat in their infancy. Save Anywhere wouldn't have been a huge thing back then. So it's not like they took that away, but they definitely they turn it into a resource. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different ways in which the player is not empowered. You've got these originally you had these sort of weird tank controls. I mean, we'll talk about all of these things in detail, but my feeling is that the way this thing got to be a horror game at all was by frustrating the normal player expectation from a video game, which is, I'm going to triumph all the time. I am awesome. I just need to progress in lots of different ways, to make myself super powerful to go kill some zombies. There's a million ways in which it takes that stuff away, but some of them are right there off the bat.
Yeah, and it stands out because of it. With vague memory of the time, but looking, like you said, about looking at all the games around that time. Yeah, I mean, it's the reason there was genre defining in that way, because people, I think, were surprised, and how sort of like there's sort of mini kind of micro conversations around this, and a little bit more recent example of Dead Rising, which maybe we talked about. I feel like we talked about at some point, but maybe it was somebody else. But embracing those limitations and making it a part of the identity of the game, and there's just the cinematic aspect of it, I think, is another thing that comes with like choices they were making that probably had an impact on their decisions as well. But pretty bold decisions to, like you said, take things away. And I wonder, one thing that's occurring to me now that I didn't make a note of, but I wonder if this game would have ever come out of the West at this time or not. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm wondering if, the Eastern sensibilities.
I would say probably not at this time. One of the things that it borrows from a lot is sort of, I don't know, maybe sort of 70s horror movies, the sort of zombie tradition. And it's
not even Living Dead. I mean, it's like it's...
Well, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been talking about that, but, not just that. I mean, certainly like maybe aspects of The Thing even. Maybe that'll come in a little bit later. But
science horror.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I see happening a lot with film is that other cultures kind of take it away from us and do something interesting with it. You see film noir kind of taking off in France in kind of a different direction post-war, and you see Japan adapting a lot of our tropes. I mean, here it's the haunted house horror zombie thing, and I almost think you need to be an outsider to do that, because we're just kind of in it.
Yeah.
It's just part of the stew we're in every day, and it takes someone special to. I mean, I'm kind of waiting for another culture to take over the superhero genre, to do something different, right? Analogous today. I would love to see somebody take that and do something that I just couldn't. Like, I'm literally culturally blinded to see, to where it's going to go. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know if it's a perfect example, but to continue the film comparison, I feel like science fiction, like European science fiction, is much different, and has, I'm trying to think of some good film examples, but there's just different sensibilities there. And then, I don't know, I guess some of the...
Russian,
Russian, the Stalker, and all of that stuff that's really heavily influenced by events that happened in that, in that area. So those
Italian Westerns.
Yeah, another good one. Yeah, completely different. You know it when you're watching it.
Right, exactly. You look at a 50s Western made in Hollywood, and you see very much what you see... Jimmy Stewart, right, as the man with the white hat, basically. Winchester 77, or Liberty Valance kind of pushes the needle a little bit, but John Wayne, right? I mean, you've got
John
these
Wayne
iconic,
is the ultimate,
you've got these, basically superheroes of the Western world, right? And then you go off to Italy, and you make these just weird experiments, Good, Bad, and the Ugly, which is like an epic film, but it's totally strange, watching it.
Well, anti-heroes too. Right?
And anti-heroes and characters who have complex motivations that are maybe not even known to the viewer. I think it really takes, a I mean, I don't want to say alien, but a non,
Yeah.
not sitting in the boiling pot,
Fresh
kind of
perspective.
person, to get that fresh perspective.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would be hard for anyone in America to make this game. This comes out at the same time as Quake.
I was going to ask if I hadn't looked at the dates, but yeah. So
Quake comes in like within a month, maybe. Marathon, the marathon, maybe the third one or whatever, is around the same time. You've got a lot of kind of other interesting stuff going on, like Time Crisis, which is a different sort of horror thing.
When was Alone in the Dark?
Alone in the Dark's going back a little bit further, and I'd have to look that up, but I want to say that's more like 90, maybe even 89, or like that, though. That kind of, like 5 years earlier, say.
Yeah.
But at this time, you've also got Tomb Raider. So, and although that's European in origin, it's kind of closely, tied with us, I would say.
No, that's a good comparison, because it's just I really want to know the genesis of this, the kernel of where this is coming from, because there's so many deliberate, and again, that's why I bring up Alone in the Dark, because it's the previous thing, that came out previous to this that I can think of that's the closest, but there's just so many deliberate decisions in here that somebody, and as we've talked about with sort of Japanese development, they're culturally very different, team structure, decision making very different, hierarchical, very top down. But there's just so many decisions in here that would have been challenged, and would have been hard to really commit to. But therein, I think, lies some of the, sometimes you get that special recipe like Final Fantasy IX or something where those risky decisions actually pay off. And I think this is the case in this case too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's
as frustrating as they are, and and you can't get away with them anymore. I think at the time, those decisions paid off.
Yeah, I mean, that was exactly where I was going to go next. Is that this is a game that I first played in 2004. We were talking about pre-show. We were finishing Republic Commando, and my go home and kind of relaxed game was to be terrified by Resident Evil, mostly at the urging of Nathan Martz, who worked with us. He said, "You've got to, this is a game you have to play."
Young Nathan,
young Nathan then, and now just a little bit young. But I mean, he really pushed this on me, and I would say something like, the only thing that's terrifying about Resident Evil is the save system, or something like that. I would be just obnoxious. And I knew people, not too long after this who would say to me, I won't play that game because I can't just save anywhere. And that, I think, is something we'll get to, but that's another, sort of case of like, it is a thing in survival horror games, and maybe generally, I mean, certainly in PlayStation 1 games, to have save points, and this is a game that doesn't fit in well to modern life, our highly interrupted modern life. Neither one of us got all the way through to where we suggested we play through, and I think that, and even having basically 2 weeks to do it. And I think that has a lot to say of that. You have to play these longer sessions, and you might lose all your progress along the way.
Yeah, pre-show, I was looking at my hours played on Steam, and I was shocked, as I told Brett, that I was playing for 4 hours, and I'm not out of the mansion yet, and I couldn't believe it, because it's just like you eat up, and the good thing about Steam is it's just playtime, it's not progress, so you just eat up time. I died a lot, and my MO in situations like this, because I generally love survival horror games and zombie games in general. I'm a sucker for them, but my MO is I start getting impatient, I start trying to rush and make mistakes, and then I just downward spiral, and just die over and over and over again, just because I will refuse to calm down and methodically go through what I need to. I know exactly what I need to do, but I just keep messing it up, and I hit that a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happens to me, and this is kind of another thing that is maybe kind of a theme of this series, is that I find myself returning to spaces with the expectation of safety. You know, when you're talking about sort of rushing through stuff, having been through an area before, you know, my expectation is it's clear, you know, that I've already dealt with whatever threats are in that room, or it was a room that was kind of nondescript, kind of a connective room or something like that. And then returning to that space, something has changed. Now, it might be something that feels innocuous but is creepy, like a body has moved. Well, okay. You know, sometimes bodies just disappear in games, so that's not a big deal, right? But then, now there's crows in this room that weren't there before. Or now, oh crap, now there are dogs bursting in through the windows. Yeah. You know.
And now a zombie that I thought I had killed has gotten up and is running faster.
Exactly, right. I mean, there's lots of different ways in which this game plays with your expectations of what the systems are.
Yes.
Or normal game systems are. You know, normal game systems are, I covered the map and now I've seen everything. You know, and if I have to go back through, that's annoying, right? Because, you know, or I'm going back through like in Super Metroid because I have new powers now and I can get to things I couldn't get to before.
Yeah.
So the space is transformed in some way because of my ability. Yeah, this is not that. No. Like, I never have a new ability.
Right. I mean, you have a few different options on killing, but it's more just, it's all lock and key. Literal lock and key, which you can't really use. Yeah, you hit upon something that I was just about to mention too, that indirectly, and something I didn't put in my notes, but it's occurring to me now, is actually a pretty important point for me, and why the more modern zombie/survival horror games that I enjoy, the reason I enjoy them more than these older ones, this isn't really a systems heavy game. There's mechanics and there's level design and there's camera design, etc. But systemically, there isn't a lot like what we would traditionally call systems. There isn't a lot going on.
It's more constraints.
It's constraints. It's scripting, right? It's linear scripting. And there's a couple things like you could say with, if you don't kill a zombie, if you don't burn a zombie or blow the head off, right, then it could potentially come back and become faster and more powerful. So you kind of got to clean up your messes as you go. That's kind of but
it's not even systemic then. It's gated. You know, it's once you've unlocked all the sword key rooms, now zombies will come back faster.
Yeah,
it's barely a system.
Isn't not based on ones you've left laying on the ground though? Do you know what I mean? Like, if you clean them up as you go, I don't think those fast ones will come.
So I had trouble, and maybe that I just wasn't doing this the right way, but I had trouble incinerating them.
It is finicky, yeah. I was able to do it, though.
Okay, so you're able to, like, use the little flask of oil?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to kind of stand right on top of them in a weird way, and then...
Okay, that's the thing. Yeah. All right. So I did try to do that, and it wasn't working. I thought
it wasn't working for me, too, and then I just kind of happened upon the hot spot for it. The collision's definitely finicky.
Or towards the middle of the body or something.
Exactly. You stand right, like, literally, so it looks janky. Stand where it looks the most janky. But I guess the point is like, I'm a big fan of the Dead Rising games, and you know, it's very systems heavy, and I love worlds like that. I love that kind of agency, and this is a very methodical, scripted, linear, you know, for the most part. There's some things you can do out of order, but there's linear and just not as interesting to me, but it does tell an intentional story, you know, or an intentional experience, gives you an intentional experience, which is nice, and it's cinematic and all of that stuff, but
I mean, I feel like whether we call them systems or not, you know, these sort of mechanics where no area starts to feel safe, even though you've been through it several times. Like in the specific thing I mentioned with the hallway where the dogs come through the windows. After that, you look at every window differently.
Yeah,
right?
That's fair. That's fair.
And I think those dogs only come in once you come back through that hallway, the second time. So
it's a famous hallway. That hallway is just classic.
Oh, I know it is. I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
I knew it was coming, and it still surprised me.
Yeah.
I'm a person for whom jump scares mostly work. They don't bother me that they're cheap. That's a total different. I'm playing this to be scared. Like, I knew picking it up that I was going to be scared there's a zombie on the cover. I get it.
Yeah.
So it's okay that they're going to, get my heart rate going by jump scares. So I'm not but
I literally knew the exact moment that they were going to come through, and it still scared me.
Still get yeah.
Well, they have, and we should get to sort of the definition of survival horror in a second too, but they developed the perfect equation for that tension building. And one of the key variables for me always, I think it's probably for everybody, is the lethality and how vulnerable you are, based on that lethality. And when those dogs come in, that a pistol is not going to be great at taking them out. You know how powerful they are. You know how little life you have. And no matter if you know they're coming or not, you're still super scared.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so there's that. I mean, the thing I was getting at was, a very systems heavy game like Grand Theft Auto 3 actually works on me in a very similar way, in that I can see what they're doing. Like when I drive around in the streets of Grand Theft Auto, you can't follow the traffic laws because all the spawned in cars and everything are super annoying and always in your way. No matter where you want to go, there's a car in your way. Right? And I know that they spawn those cars specifically there to make that happen. And the same thing's happening here. When you revisit a spot, something changes. And so you start to feel over time the accumulation of these small details that no place you're going to be is going to be safe, with the exception probably of sort of an area with a typewriter.
The music, when the music changes. Yeah.
And the music changes, right, to say, oh, hey, you're in typewriter land. You're cool.
But so you're saying it's sort of like it's an unspoken system.
Yes.
Like it's a tonal
it's a tonal
system,
thing. It's a design thing, and they achieve it through multiple ways. It's some of it is zombies that sort of progress in their lethality. Some of it is spaces that literally, like the dogs come through, and now it's like, is that going to happen again? They find different ways, or bodies that disappear, or the crows that do appear. I think I probably marked down some others, but it's sort of those sorts of things. They're not. We wouldn't call them systems, but they are design choices. Like they're design pillars of here's how we're going to create suspense in our game.
Yeah. Well, and I guess what I'm saying is, I feel like you could maybe say. I'm wondering how intentional. Well, I don't know. I guess obviously it's intentional, but I feel like maybe are you giving them too much credit in it as a macro choice versus a micro choice? You know what I mean? Design choice versus okay, I know that the linear path they're going to be going from here to here to here. So when they come back through here, I know they're always going to go this way. And so I'm going to spawn a new, pacing wise, I'm going to spawn a new guy there versus I would be interested to know if they had any macro decisions that I would call more in the system space that's going to influence that or not, because it's also a cinematic trope that building tension that they could have gotten from cinema as well. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
In any horror movie, but
it
could
feels,
be.
It feels to me specifically chosen. It really does. And in particular that dog hallway, because famous dog hallway, right? But coming through that and having gone through and actually discovered this time for the first time that you can move the things that are along the wall, the drawers and stuff. You can find stuff under them, So I had literally gone through there at least a couple and maybe 3 times, but always in the same direction. And maybe I came back through once. I can't recall. But, because I was going back there, back in that area, there's a typewriter room that has the chest where you can store stuff. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about inventory in a minute. But, I felt like there were too many ways in which environments changed. Like, even going outside to where there was a bunch of plants and the chemical, the fertilizer bag, which I don't know what you use for, but it's there.
I think I remembered finally, but yeah.
Yeah, I haven't remembered yet what that's for, but I picked it up and I put it in the chest so that I have it. But the second time I went out there, a dog attacked me. So this space I had already been to and felt totally safe, that had iron bars around it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not safe. Anytime you go to a place twice. Yeah. So I feel like...
Yeah, that's fair. I mean...
The ultimate playthrough of this game, you want to visit every room once, if you can. That you want to make a map that, and you want to think through very carefully what you're going to pick up when and what you're going to come back through. Sometimes it's okay to leave the zombies alone because you can evade them. So you just leave them to be the kind of normal, slow, doddering zombie that they are, so that they don't turn into that other crazy zombie.
Yeah. Which is a good contradictory, decision there, for players to make once you know that about how that works, because you're also going to, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a second, or maybe now, resource management is a cornerstone of this genre that they set up really well here. And you never really quite feel like you're ahead of the game when a lot of RPGs, as we've talked about, toward the end of a game, you're going to be pretty well stocked and have no worries about money or any of your resources because
or shooters for that matter.
Or shooters,
mentioning Quake or Tomb Raider. I mean, both of those games are games that by the end you've got plenty of ammo and plenty of abilities and different sorts of weapons and you have no worries on that score.
Yeah,
it's now a narrative drive, and here it pairs that narrative drive with, oh hey, and by the way, things are getting worse. It's almost, in a way, it's very similar to System Shock 2, in that your resources, that your weapons are always breaking. You're limited in how many shots you're going to get out of a gun without finding a way to repair it.
Yeah.
And here that's true too, right? I mean, your weapons aren't going to actually degrade, but there's only so much handgun ammo, and they're not making more. It's what's there.
And it's feeling every shot, the impact of pulling that trigger every time. It's funny because I haven't felt it even in modern games in quite a while, where it takes quite a few to plug a zombie to take it down, and you only have 10 or whatever. And it's like, man, I just spent a lot of ammo on this one dude. And you feel it,
Yep.
and
you're wondering, and then you get to the typewriter and you're like, should I save?
Yeah.
Am I going to have to do this again?
Right. And I'm trying to, I'm not doing any save scumming as far as trying to get it perfect. So when I mess up or kind of waste some of my resources, I'm just eating it just to see how it goes. Cause I think in the past playthroughs, I've been trying to really min-max it. And it's some nail biters as far as 2 shots left, it's like 2 shots and some knife fighting, I guess.
Yeah.
Or this guy I'm just going to run right by and just avoid forever,
I'm guessing you're playing on sort of normal, medium difficulty or whatever.
Yes, I'm playing on the medium one. Yeah.
Okay. I'm playing on the easiest difficulty.
Oh, okay.
I decided to do that just so I could have a shot at getting through more of it.
Yeah, it's probably wise. I should have.
But the big difference, I think, is that there is more ammo. There are more typewriter ribbons.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Do you take less damage? I wonder because
no. The damage I think is still the same. That I think is actually, I think there's actually just a little bit more empowerment. So you have more resources. There's more daggers. The daggers that you can react if you get grabbed and stab or whatever. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of those. There were like a lot. There were like a half a dozen of those, which felt like a lot. I've gone through several dozen rounds of handgun ammo. I found the shotgun, and I can't remember how to get it, so you can take it out of that room that it's in. I don't know. That might be something that comes up later. There's a lot of this stuff that, even having just played it a dozen years ago, I just no idea. Can't remember.
So you found it, but you weren't able to get it out of that room? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, there's a shotgun on the wall. It's kind of.
I have it. Yeah, no, I was just wondering what was happening to you.
It comes out of that rack, right?
Yeah.
And the rack thing lifts.
Yeah.
And then you go out into the next room, and the ceiling starts coming down.
Yeah. And who are you playing as?
I'm playing as Jill.
Yeah, so am I. So then what happens after the room starts coming down?
I had to go back. I couldn't go out. I had to go back into that room and put it back because I couldn't get out.
Oh, weird. So Barry opened the door for me and saved me.
Oh.
And I got out of there with the shotgun.
That's weird.
And I think I did that in the past playthroughs as well, but I don't remember what the trigger was. Like you go and you start trying to open the door, and then he hears you or something and comes and helps you.
Oh, maybe I just didn't do it enough.
Maybe.
Wow, that's weird.
Yeah, so I have it. The funny thing about it, though, is I had my inventory was full, which we should talk about in a second.
Right.
So I couldn't take everything from that room. And once you get out and that thing closes, you can't get back into that room again, I don't think. So if you don't take the shotgun out with you, you're not going to get it from there. I guess a little bit of a hint is there is a broken shotgun in another location that I think you can swap the one on the rack with.
Oh, yeah. Well, and there's a lot of that in this game, actually.
But I didn't find that before going in there, so you can do that out of order and basically, lose access to that room if you mess it up. So I guess actually you can't. You'll always get the shotgun because that's what triggers the thing.
Right. I don't think there's anything else in there that's
There's
important.
a ribbon and a dagger, yeah. And I got the dagger, but not the ribbon. So, and that was early on, and I was pissed because I was like, I needed that ribbon. So, But,
okay. Let's go to inventory then, because we're dancing around a lot about it. What is it? 8 slots?
That sounds about right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's not a lot of space.
Well, it is another part. Like I don't know if anyone's ever done this, but we could probably write some sort of equation about the survival horror, equation, which are the variables that equal this genre. But another critical one is inventory management, because it really just comes down to those both split second and sort of mid-tier decision making that you have to just decide what you're going to do, and you have to make a hard choice. Something's going to, you got to take this thing before you find a crate. You're going to either have to drop something or not take something.
Right, not take.
That's
an important distinction.
Yes, it is.
Because once your inventory is full, you're not picking anything up.
Yeah, or you're using herbs that you don't want to use, or there's some.
You're using up resources that are not giving you any benefit, or you weren't planning on using. I've been not picking up any herbs at all, because I know, I don't have the space. I want to carry mission critical elements, and I'll pick up the herbs when I need them. I'll use them immediately. So I basically keep a slot open, just in case. Yeah. So that I can pick up a thing and use it immediately. But it's really fascinating to me because that is, again, it's not a system like we normally think of it in terms of like, oh, there's programmatic stuff going on here. Yeah. This is more like item placement, and inventory, and then the crate where you can store stuff. So there is a crate where you basically can unlimited storage. You can store as many things as you can get to that room, and there's a typewriter in that room, so you can save the game. But there's fundamentally what that's forcing is, systemically speaking, it's forcing you to go back through spaces again.
Yeah.
Because you need to get to that room either to pick up something that you've now figured out how to use because you've found the lock that key opens.
Yeah.
Or you've run out of space and now you want to store some stuff so that when you go encounter new things, you have room to pick it up.
Yeah. Well, and the one of the level design repercussions of this, which was most likely intentional, is they can build, even though this game doesn't just take place in the mansion, they can build a game that does just take place in a mansion because they have put these sorts of constraints on the player where you're going to be going back and forth for different reasons, right? Based on not knowing what is ahead, which is therein lies part of the frustration of this particular first couple games and the genre as well, and why I think people bounce off of it. That you don't know what's ahead, and so you're not sure which thing you need to bring with you, and there's not good indication of that stuff. And just all in the pre-show, I was talking about this too, where it's like, oh yeah, this is probably the last time I'm going to play this game,
right?
Because I just played it enough to where I'm like, oh yeah, this whole
is
thing.
Really a farewell tour for us. This podcast, we're playing all these games. We're like, we just want to put these away, put them in a garage sale.
I mean, and that's not saying that it isn't a great game, and it is. I still like the nostalgia is still there, and it is genre defining. But there's certain things that even RE4, did a better job of.
Sure.
And I'm glad that.
But RE4 is much more player empowerment focused.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it puts a laser sight on the gun, right? It makes even the gunplay easy.
Yeah.
It's definitely an action horror. It's a character. There's a way in which you're not sure this character is going to get out. Like at all.
You mean in this one?
Yeah, in this one it feels like this could be like I don't know, Dress to Kill or something, where you spend all this time with this, like you don't know.
It doesn't look good. Yeah.
It doesn't look good for our hero, right? And it's hard to even call her or Chris, if you're playing Chris, him a hero, because you're not really sure. You have these other characters. I imagine playing this in 1996. You would not have known, am I going to end this game with this character? Like, I would have been literally concerned. Like, am I going to invest a lot in this and not, which is usually an RPG problem. Like, I don't know if this character is going to still be around, either because the character is going to die or because they're just going to get pissed at my moral whatever. But here it's like literally, am I going to survive this? Am I going to get through? And what's going to happen if I don't? And you kind of get the hint, the first time you die. And these days you get an achievement or a trophy for it or whatever that says, oh, hey, get used to this.
Yeah,
you're going to see more of this.
Nice touch.
Anybody who's many people who are playing in 2016 are playing it for a nostalgic. They've played it before because it's a tough selling proposition these days, I think, to make a game like this.
Yeah, and to that, a little minor point to that, I actually started playing with the default original controls just to remind myself about that, and for the podcast specifically, tank controls and all of that stuff. And man, I just could not do it.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Okay, I did my due diligence from an academic perspective, and I remember, yes, there's a reason why they.
I don't play this way anymore. Yeah. No, I
but that had another. That was another. The reason I wanted to play it is that's another layer.
It's another layer of disempowerment.
Yeah, to make it really to make you feel like you're a fish out of water when you are fighting one zombie. And it, to some degree, it works, right? It makes you feel like, and I am giving them too much credit here, but maybe not. It makes you feel maybe like it would if you were actually seeing a zombie for the first time, not knowing what's going on.
And panicking.
You're panicking. You're fumbling. You're not sure. Yeah. It's really interesting. Really interesting intentional choices for them.
No, I had played it I had played it that way in 2004 or whatever when I played it on the GameCube. And I have since played a couple other games sort of late in the PlayStation cycle called the Fear Effect games.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't think I played them, though.
No, I mean, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend them. I really like they have sort of a Chinese mythology and stuff about the Chinese afterlife and things like that I did like. But it is tank controls, and I mean the animation's really nice, but it's the same sort of feel as this game, maybe with a little bit more streaming backgrounds with activity. Let's turn to some of the other stuff that's really effective here. That's kind of engendered it as a classic. So you keep saying cinematic.
Yeah, we got to talk about camera.
Yeah. So there's big topic. So yeah, give me one, and then whatever thread you pull on, I'll tug on it a little bit more and go in another direction.
On camera?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and this actually relates to the original controls versus alternate controls, because the tank controls in the default version, I was thinking about this today. Like, I feel like I can understand their decision making from a design perspective for the tank controls based on their camera, because controls and camera obviously always go hand in hand.
Absolutely. Especially 3D.
Yeah, for 3D and for third person, especially. But and so keeping the relative stick movement based on the camera positioning in tank controls, I can see in some people's heads will make a lot of sense to you. Mm-hmm. But when you go to the alternate controls, it makes more sense from a it's character relative rather than as camera relative. But when the camera perspective changes, then the stick will mean a different thing, you know? So if you're running down one hallway and then the camera shifts and you keep your thumb on that stick, you'll keep moving in that same direction, even though it doesn't make sense.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's funny because automatic reaction to that is I automatically let go of the stick every time the camera changes.
Yeah, me too. No, and
that wasn't a problem that really anybody solved well. I think it was Devil May Cry who actually did it first. That was a PS2 original.
I
think PS2. I think Devil May Cry was PS2, and I think that was the first time that somebody had done that. And then, of course, this remake came out afterwards, where you kind of. So what he's talking about is you're running, left, say, and now the camera changes. So you've pushed the stick to the left. The camera changes in such a way that now you're facing the character face on. So it would make sense to be pushing forward now, but left, until you let go of it, left still is pushing you forward towards the camera in the direction the character was originally running on the previous screen. Yeah. So there's sort of a spatial continuity that makes sense to the player, that it makes sense to me that I'm still running in this direction. If you kind of, as long as it doesn't, break that line, right, of like going, if it went all the way around and now you're actually moving right instead of left, I think your brain would break. But, it's usually at most a 90-degree turn, and you're still okay with it.
Yeah.
You're not pushing left to move right.
It's if you think too hard about it, it breaks your brain, and it's basically camera relative versus character relative cameras, or controls. And I guess my point is like, the conversations they had about the logic of it all made sense to them, which would result in some of those tank controls. But it doesn't change the fact that naturally it feels better to have character relative. You know what I mean? And
right.
And the industry moved forward without them on that, and they eventually put this in later. And then, of course, RE4 being a great example of their own eventual evolution that also then influenced Gears and other games. So,
well, and the other thing too is that I think that Super Mario 64 was not a long time before this game. I hesitate to put a year on it. I mean, could it have even been after? Is that possible? I don't think so. I think it was a little bit before. probably like 94. But, that was a game that was very hard to emulate because it did it perfectly, but nobody really understood the magic of how they did it, I think, at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was difficult just from a purely technical perspective to know. I mean, there wasn't a lot. I mean, GDC existed then, but nobody from Japan was going. So there wasn't really a place to share those kind of ideas, and this was the early days of the internet besides. So it wasn't easy for that stuff to cross-pollinate, and especially in Japan, which, people didn't tend to move around from company to company a lot either. So it's like, really, really difficult for an innovation in 94 to make its way to another company by 96. Even if this game had started after, Mario came out, Super Mario 64 came out. So,
well, you mentioned it too. The other game that when I was working on Tomb Raider, we would talk about a lot from a sort of evolutionary perspective. Tomb Raider 1 and Mario 64 came out around the same time, and they couldn't be more different from third-person camera perspective. Because that talk about controls for her and just the clunkiness of the camera and everything, right? And then you had this Mario coming out at the same time, and just having this different fluidity to it was just a really interesting comparison that we would talk a lot about.
Yeah, well, just to further the digression, I mean, I think a lot of that was because of Super Mario 64, they made the camera literally another character. It was controlled by this little cloud floaty turtle thing with a camera hanging out of it, and I think that literal disconnect of like, no, you're controlling this separate cameraman to control the camera, was a sort of necessary step for players to understand, many players, not all players, but many players to understand, this is how this is a separate thing. Whereas in a lot of third-person games, the camera is either fixed, in the case of Resident Evil and other games like it, including Fear Effect that I mentioned earlier, or it was character-centric in that it was basically on a stick behind the character's butt, right? I mean, it was, wherever that was. I mean, it was on a line behind the character and not super fluid.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing it sort of respected was the geometry of the level, and sometimes not even then, so depending, right?
Yeah.
I can't find a solution. I guess we're going to make this wall transparent, or whatever. But
super difficult stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
That was a really, I mean, it's an interesting time in games from a camera perspective, especially for third person games.
Yeah. And I think the other element, which you probably have on your list too, from a camera perspective, that is always weird for me, going back to these games. I think at the time it wasn't as weird, but the sort of the fork in the road, I guess, creative decision of cinematic versus, I guess I'll say, cinematic versus accessible, because the camera angles are always pretty well thought, or well framed and well placed, and they're very dramatic, and they show the room off really in a cool way, and there's a lot going for them, and
a lot of Dutch tilt going on.
Yeah, drama, and there's a lot of film tricks in there. However, they're all very seldom are they actually accessible and usable from a usability perspective.
Right?
And that was their trade-off. There was like, well, we're going to make a super cool looking game with these awesome, backgrounds and camera angles and stuff, but the players are not going to.
Well, no, and I honestly think that's a good choice if you're trying to scare somebody.
Yeah, no,
the less you can see of what's coming at you, the more that your imagination could go to work. I mean,
right.
We're playing
of the two choices. Yeah,
we're playing in this HD remake where the zombies are lovingly gross. But the 200 polygon humanoid models of PlayStation 1 era, not going to quite measure up as far as that goes. So having them mostly off screen, having only one character on screen is actually a huge benefit. Mm-hmm. From that perspective.
Well, it lets them see, definitely lets they do a good job with, well, in the remake at least, I don't remember if it was in the original, but some interesting audio tricks and work with what you are and are not seeing on that particular camera, mirrors, shadows, lighting, and it's because they're fixing these cameras in interesting ways where they can really play with your mind. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely true. The other, and I think actually we're getting already close to an hour. But the last thing I wanted to say about cinema usage was literally cinematic techniques in pre-rendered cutscenes. I don't want to go too far deep on the opening cutscene. It kind of establishes everything that's going to go on. What I found really interesting were the little interstitial cutscenes, mostly around introductions to zombies. There's I think the first one you see, it literally only renders the zombie, and then it's all black behind. And it's like that moment of terror of, I'm seeing something I've never seen before, and so it's literally the only thing I can see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's a moment of pure, like, oh my God, this is not happening.
Yeah.
And so the only thing you see is it'd be like if somebody was walking down the street and had a second head, you would literally only see that person. The whole background would disappear, because all you would be able to look at was what the heck is going on here.
Yeah.
And so there's that moment the first time she sees a zombie. It's in that hall right beyond the dining room.
Yeah, yeah.
The other one I thought was really interesting and impressive was a switch, and cinematically I'm not sure what it's meant to do. Other than build suspense. But when she's leaving the kitchen the first time, there's that kitchen in the basement. Lots of good descriptions down there. But there's a kitchen down there, and when she goes to leave, you get a cutscene from the zombie's perspective coming down the cellar stairs to the door that she's behind.
Yeah.
It's a great moment because it puts her in a position of danger, which is something we'll probably talk about in a future episode, because that ties in really well with Tomb Raider, which we've mentioned before. But it puts the character you're in control of in a position of danger, giving you enough time to appreciate that danger without having to do anything with these funky controls. You know what I mean? You have that moment of like, oh, this is what's on the other side of this door. It's, 15 seconds long. So it's 15 seconds where you're going, oh crap, what am I going to do? And you can't do anything until that's over.
Yeah, I mean it's a very effective. I mean, I'm always mixed on those because I know they're going to place that thing right next to me once they give me control, And if because I'm such a min-max player, if I actually had control during that thing, I would already be running away.
Right.
So it feels like it's so limiting. However,
they're taking that away from you.
No, I know, and it's great and it's intentional. And if you equate that to a horror film with that same exact shot and same exact moment, but the awesome thing that I think blew people away at the time is as soon as that moment was over, you had control. You know what I mean? Like that same scene would occur exactly the same way in a slasher flick or whatever zombie movie. Sure, but you don't have control
might see
afterwards.
through Jason Voorhees' eyes.
Or whatever. Exactly. Friday the 13th is a good example. It's like you immediately have agency right after that to actually fail or succeed,
right.
And that is tremendously powerful for a horror genre.
And yet it still works. Like it's still. Because of all the other things that are going on with the sort of resource limitations, the inventory limitations, the sort of spatial, terror of like, I'm more of a dread, like, oh, I'm going to have to go through that thing that I haven't been through in a while. What's going to change? Because of all those other things, you don't feel empowered in that moment. Even though you're able to do a thing, you still feel like you're a character in one of those movies because you don't have a lot of options. Because, again, they are going to put that zombie right next to you. And min-max player Tim is not going to be able to do anything about it.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I guess you started off with this point, but it's a game about disempowering the player. And, it's really the first one we've played in the series that's like that.
Yeah,
The whole genre is based on it, and it isn't for everybody. Like you mentioned it too, but I'd say I don't know, 1 in 4 developers or friends that I talk to, just it's not their genre. It's not their cup of tea, because they know the equation that we've been talking about. They know what it is, and you got to be in for it. And I think in the indie space, I'm excited and happy to see people bringing some of this stuff back, because I feel like, to your point about RE4 and beyond, I think since RE4, like, most of the survival horror games have become very actiony, and you're starting to lose some of these because people are just afraid to make these hard decisions. I mean, I'll be honest, like, I don't know if somebody made a complete throwback. I don't know if I'd go play it or not.
Actually, and it's a tough. I mean, that makes it a niche that might not be sustainable as budgets rise.
I think we talked about this game during System Shock 2, but I own it and have it installed, but I haven't gotten to it yet. But Alien Isolation comes to mind, which I assume that's basically a survival horror, disempowering survival horror.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's case in point. One of the reasons I think I haven't started it is because it's just daunting, because I know what I'm in for.
It's much more stealth oriented, though, in a way that this one isn't. I mean, part of what's interesting about the characters here is that they are, highly trained military personnel. If we're to believe it, and even they are having a hard time, right? So, it's kind of a flip on, like a slasher movie where, all the victims are dumb teens, right? And so that, they're not super cogent, they're not savvy, and so them making a bunch of dumb decisions that we, codify into a bunch of rules and make fun of and scream makes sense, right? It makes sense that they're teenagers and they don't know what the hell they're doing with a homicidal maniac after them. But these are people who are trained, right? It sort of flips that and says, "Oh yeah, you're totally badass and powerful. And by the way, we're going to take away all the things that make you powerful."
Yeah, that's a good point. That makes the monsters feel more, more impactful, right? Because even these badass characters are afraid of them. So as a player, you're like, well, they must be rough then if these, And in some cases, these characters are dying as well.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting.
What a game. All right. Well, let's take a break. Come back and do some quick reader feedback, and then wrap it up.
Sounds good.
Welcome back from the break. Teased before that we were going to do a little bit of feedback. We have a couple of things. You remember Mr. Futile?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, he was Hair Futile, as you recall.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay.
His actual name is Jan Bronsberg. I hope I'm not mispronouncing that too badly. And he wrote in with a question, actually. He said, a couple episodes back, you two mentioned the trophy system, and I would like to know what's your opinion about trophies/achievements nowadays. On the one hand, I really like it because trophies encourage me to play beyond the story of a game, see more of what the game developers created. But on the other hand, more than often, it feels like trophies are just there to pump up a shallow game. What is the point in a game to collect 150 objects throughout the map? For example, every Assassin's Creed game. What is the point in driving the same course with 6 different cars, which all drive the same but look a little bit different, such as Batman Arkham Knight? Do trophies have a purpose beyond just simple bragging, or are they merely there for competition to extend the playtime of a game? Tim, you answer it all for us. What's it mean?
I guess 3 things kind of come to mind for me with them. So first off, I mean, this is probably an obvious thing that goes without saying, but I think it's worth stating that just like any design, there can be good design and bad design. And I'm by no means saying that any trophy system, any trophies I've ever been involved with in a game I've worked on have ever been perfect or great or anything or even good. But there are definitely a lot of bad trophy designs out there where it is just milking time.
Sure.
The good ones, though, I do believe are really additive to the game. And what I tend to use them for, one of my problems, personal problems, is I'm a completionist generally, especially for games I like. And so the trophies do end up being that checklist of things that I will feel like I have completely finished a game. So I will go after them. But on the flip side, if I'm not completely into a game, then I always feel bad because I know I'm not going to get a platinum or whatever, because I just know I'm not going to get into it that much. Right. But like the Arkham games, for instance, are games that I do get platinums in because I love them so much. And I'll spend that extra time. But it's these days it's rare because it just takes so much time to get that stuff. But I think good trophy designs are really good additive experiences if they're really planned to kind of be like a tourist mode, right? It shows you all the parts of the game that you may not have actually sought out if you hadn't looked at that list of sort of checklist of to-dos.
Sure. No, there's a lot of variety in them. I feel like, there are certain types of games that I'm totally fine with very workmanlike trophy setups, narrative-focused games. You know what? If you're going to give me a trophy after every chapter because and I guess what I should state just right up front, platform holders, at least in the console space, demand these. Like Sony and Microsoft are telling you these have to be, these are part of shipping a game these days. So it's not necessarily a design choice to even have them. It's required. So I'm going to put that caveat right out there because there are games where they just don't make a lot of sense. I played Firewatch, or Gone Home, although Gone Home actually did more with theirs than they probably needed to. And I look at those and I say, okay, Walking Dead, whatever. After every chapter, you give me a trophy, and at the end I get it's not a platinum, I think, because they're not complicated enough or something like that. Or they're downloadable. I'm not sure what the rubric is anymore. I have, 23 platinum trophies or whatever, and there's a couple of games that are awfully close. I don't normally do the multiplayer ones. I am also kind of a completionist, but I embrace that. I actually feel like, you know what? I'm a person who really likes to have a to-do list. And I get a certain amount of pleasure just from crossing things off the to-do list. Like there are times when I literally make a to-do list for the end of a game. After I've basically finished a game, I go and I find some guide and find out what are all the trophies that I missed, and I just go do them. Because I love to just cross it off and say, yeah, did that one. Oh, yeah, got that one. Prototype 2, perfect example. Not a game I really needed to play twice. But there was a trophy for finishing it on hard or something like that. And at that point, I was just like mopping up the things I hadn't done yet. Very much an Assassin's Creed kind of model. Lots of collectibles. Impressive. Yeah. Playing it through a second time is actually a lot quicker because you're skipping a lot of side stuff that you don't need to do. But but that said, it's the same thing, just like, yeah. But I will say that I agree that there are times where you're like, oh, I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't know that the systems afforded that. Yeah. Or there will be games that I'm just loving so damn much. Like Guacamelee is one that comes to mind that I got a platinum trophy on that I just loved to death and just wanted more and just was like, at the end when I didn't have all the trophies, I was like, what am I missing? Because I want to not miss anything in this game that this game has to offer. Yeah. So there was that too. I'm a person who just doesn't mind like, oh yeah, I'm right now enjoying my escapist entertainment. And part of that is I get a little squirt of dopamine whenever I get a ka-ching of, getting something, totally. Like an achievement.
Yeah, that's. I think that is a valuable thing to them. I guess for me, I think they are an opportunity for developers, and I do like when developers are thoughtful with them. I think the unfortunate thing in my experience is that they often are deprioritized.
Sure.
when you're making the game, and they come in kind of hot and last minute, and they're not very thoughtful. But I think the games that actually put the time into it, I really appreciate that.
I think Double Fine does a spectacular job with their achievements, I will say. I got all of them for Headlander. Those weren't particularly inspired because a lot of those were just sort of, I mean, that's a Metroidvania kind of game. But there were some that were kind of off the beaten path that were kind of fun to find. Costume Quest has some great stuff. Like there's
I remember those.
You can have a character who's dressed as candy corn that doesn't do anything, and you can play the whole game, and you get an achievement for playing the whole game with the candy corn that has no attacks, like in this JRPG style game. There's lots of good stuff in the Costume Quest games. I mean, they're just very clever and creative, and even in the remakes or the remasters of Grim Fandango or Day of the Tentacle that we played, there's some really great stuff in there where it's like, oh, that's really funny if you thought that this might be a solution to this puzzle, or you did this thing, or you talked to the mummy in all 3 time periods, or whatever they are. You had these kind of quirky, like, oh, that's not doing anything or whatever. So they were like a conversation with the player. Like, oh, I see what you're doing.
Yeah, it exposes you to things that that were there potentially in the older games, but that you didn't know were there. So I think it's good to expose more people to that stuff.
So the last thing I would say then about achievements or trophies or whatever is if you are not enjoying them, don't do them.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to be on their deathbed going, God, I wish I had just gotten the last achievement in yada yada. So just let them go. Let it go. Let it go.
But I can't.
Yeah, well, Tim, you can do it. I believe in you. But yeah, if you're not enjoying a thing, maybe not do that thing. Okay. And then we did have one sort of yay us. We had from Drew Homan, an iTunes review. Finally, a new game club. He says, I was a big fan of Rebel FM's short-lived game club series, and I was really happy to come across Dev Game Club recently. They play through a game in parts, and whether you are playing along at the moment or played through the game in the past, there's a lot of good discussion and clever insight. Since they both work in the industry, they also provide some interesting knowledge beyond the previously mentioned Rebel FM podcast. So far, they have done a good job picking games that allow freedom in gameplay, like Hitman 2 and Fallout, and true classics like Super Metroid and the upcoming Resident Evil. With so many games podcasts being based on simple new release and news coverage, I think you owe it to yourself to check out such a well-executed podcast that goes in depth on games like this one does. Highly recommended. So thank you, Drew.
Wow. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Very nice review.
Very much what we're trying to get after. You can hunt us down in iTunes. I've got my RSS feeds all set up to catch your reviews so that I get to see them. We'd love to see them and read them on the air. And email is good too. You can send that to devgameclub@gmail.com. In the meantime, you can also find the podcast at Dev Game Club on Twitter. I guess before we sign off, I should say, hey, what are we playing to next?
All right.
We're going to play some more Resident Evil. How about that? We're going to get to the tunnels. So that basically means for us, since we didn't quite get to where we wanted to, we're going to leave the mansion, go out to the residence, and then come back to the mansion, which is how you get into the tunnels beneath the mansion. And I'm pretty sure there's a good boss battle that happens right about then. So I'm not sure whether we'll hit that or not for next time, but it'll be around that time. So yeah, try to get to those tunnels, and it's a perfect weekend for it. Halloween is on Monday. We're all terrified of a Trump future. I mean, it's good. It's a good time to be scared in America.
Yeah, who is the real Resident Evil?
That's right. Who is the real biohazard here? I'm saying the guy with the orange skin. Anyway, enough of my political wool gathering. In the meantime, I am Brett_Duville on Twitter, and he is
Tim Longo Jr.
with the JR at the end.
JR, not spelled out. Yes.
And we'll see you next time. Good night.
Good night.